Welcome back to Macbeth Explained, Annotate with me. In this video, we'll be looking at Act 1, Scene 4. It's a very short scene, but it gives us some interesting insight into Duncan as a character, the relationship between Duncan and Macbeth, and of course, it gives us a hint about Macbeth's secret ambitions. So if you'd like to pause, go grab your copy of the text if you have it, a digital copy if you prefer, highlighters, pens, anything that you need, and press play when you're ready to start. Scene 4, 4's the palace. Flourish. So flourish is sort of like drums and trumpets, like a sort of fanfare announcing that the king has come in, a sort of dun da 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 sort of music, and it's used in place to sort of announce that a royal character has entered the scene. So trumpets and drums announcing the arrival of a royal character. In this case, of course, is King Duncan. Enter Duncan, the king, Malcolm and Donalbain, his sons, Lennox, who of course is a thane or lord, and attendants, the sort of servants that would follow the king. Duncan asks, is execution done on Cawdor? Are not those in commission yet returned? So he's asking about what's happening with the Thane of Cawdor, who of course is no longer the Thane of Cawdor. He's been demoted, as we know, because he betrayed the king and the king gave orders for his execution. So Duncan is asking, has the former Thane of Cawdor been executed yet? The person that I've commissioned, basically the person that's meant to be putting him to death, have they returned yet? Malcolm says, my liege is like your majesty, or a way to sort of address a king. My liege or my lord. They are not yet come back, but I have spoke with one that saw him die. So we know that the Thane of Cawdor has been executed. And here we're about to get a description of the Thane of Cawdor's last moments before he was executed. So one person that witnessed the death said, who did report, so the person that saw the death reported that very frankly he confessed his treasons, implored your highness's pardon, and set forth a deep repentance. Repentance is when you sort of beg for forgiveness. So in his last moments, he completely admitted to what he'd done. So he confessed his treasons. He tried to beg for the king's forgiveness and set forth a deep repentance. So he basically indicated that he really deeply regretted what he did. Nothing in his life became him like the leaving of it. The best aspect, the best part of the sort of high point of his life, the point in his life where he was the best, was actually his moment of death. Yeah, leaving his life is the time where he showed the most qualities. He died as one that had been studied in his death to throw away the dearest thing he owned, as 'twere a careless trifle. His death was almost like he was happy to throw away his life as if it was a careless trifle, as if it was nothing, like not a big deal at all. So we know here that the final moments of the Thane of Cawdor were very honourable. He admitted to what he did, he begged for forgiveness, and he died almost willingly. He sort of knew that he deserved to die. He sort of accepts his fate. Now, of course, much later on in the play, when we see what happens to Macbeth, this scene is really interesting to come back to when you see Macbeth's own death. Again, spoiler alert, I'm really sorry if this is your first time discovering the text and I'm sort of ruining things that are going to happen later. But Macbeth, of course, will commit treason and will be executed. And it's really interesting to see how these two characters who essentially suffer the same fate meet their fate in completely different ways. So this is an interesting scene to compare to Macbeth's own death. It's a really interesting juxtaposition. They are definitely very different styles of dying, as it were. And when you finish reading the play or studying the play, I would definitely advise you to come back to the scene. If you have already studied or read Macbeth and you're a bit more familiar with the ending of Macbeth, it's a really interesting juxtaposition here. And of course, if the question in the exam is on the theme of treason or betrayal, this is a really interesting sort of element of the story to look at. The Thane of Cawdor, his treason, his death, compared to Macbeth's treason, Macbeth's death. So Duncan says, there is no art to find the mind's construction in the face. He was a gentleman on whom I built an absolute trust. This is a really important quote. It tells us a lot about Duncan, and it's also a great quote for foreshadowing. So Duncan says, there is no art to find the mind's construction in the face. He's basically saying there is no science to working out what's in someone's heart or mind just based on their appearance, just based on their face. So I'll add the translation sort of here, translation of, the sort of more modernized version of it. There is no science, no way of knowing someone's true self through their appearance. There's no way to sort of know what's truly in someone's heart just based on how they look. And this links really, really well to the theme of course, appearances. The theme of appearances versus reality. It goes really well, of course, with the theme of betrayal and deception, which runs throughout Macbeth. But there's often talk, especially from Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, about deception. There's, of course, the famous look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it. At some point, Macbeth says something like, the false face must hide what the false heart does know, or something like that. So there's a lot of really important quotations that talk about the fact that appearances can often be deceptive. And in fact, appearances can be used as part of deception. Looking a certain way can help you get away with doing bad things. Also, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth think. So this links to the theme of deception, betrayal, and appearance versus reality, or appearance versus truth. So knowing when quotations are linked with the theme is a really good way of sort of practicing for the first assessment objective, AO1. AO1 is going to really assess your ability to address the question, the exam question. And of course, the exam question is almost always going to be on a theme or an idea explored in the text. So if the theme or the idea of deception or appearances is comes up as an exam question, being able to make links between what happens in the text and quotations to the theme in the question, in the exam question, and that's how you're going to get a lot of your marks. But not only being able to make links to the theme, but also being able to discuss the theme on a sort of more personal level. So being able to actually give your thoughts and opinions on this theme. What do you think? Do you agree? So say, for example, here, when Duncan says, there's no way to really know what's in someone's heart just based on their appearance. Do you agree with this? You are completely allowed to give your own perspective. You can sort of almost argue with the characters and argue with Shakespeare's ideas as part of your essay. And in fact, if you are aiming for the top marks for English literature, they reward what is referred to in the mark scheme as critical thinking. So being able to actually give your own opinion and criticize or sort of debate with the ideas that Shakespeare is presenting in the text. So This is where it's really good to know the link between important quotations and important themes, so that you then have the confidence to talk about these themes and to give your own thoughts and opinions about these themes. So then Duncan says, he, of course talking still about the Thane of Cawdor, was a gentleman on whom I built an absolute trust. And here we find out that Duncan is shocked about what happened with the Thane of Cawdor, because he completely trusted, and he had an absolute trust of the Thane of Cawdor. And of course, we're starting to see this pattern here with Duncan trusting people that betray him. And this is massive foreshadowing for what's about to happen. And of course, this foreshadows what's going to happen to Macbeth. Talk of Macbeth, talk of the devil. Enter Macbeth, Banquo, Ross and Angus. And Ross and Angus were, of course, the lords that were sent from Duncan to tell Macbeth the news that he's become the Thane of Cawdor. This is how Duncan greets him. Oh, worthiest cousin. So again, reinforcing the fact that they're related, and worthy, of course, being worthy of love and respect. Giving a lot of value to Macbeth. In these scenes, the early scenes of the play, we see really that how much Duncan values Macbeth. The sin of my ingratitude even now was heavy on me. He feels like he sinned in the sense that he hasn't shown his gratitude, how grateful he is towards Macbeth and how grateful he is for the things that Macbeth does for him. He feels like he's almost not able to show this enough, and he feels like that's almost sinful. That's a really bad thing. Thou art, you are so far before that swiftest wing of recompense is slow to overtake you. So recompense means reward. He's saying you sort of move so fast, you fly so fast that even the fastest reward can't keep up with you. It's almost like Macbeth is doing so many good things that Duncan is struggling to kind of keep up and keep rewarding him. Wouldst thou hast less deserved, if you had deserved less, that the proportion both of thanks and payment might have been mine, if only you were less deserving, so that my thanks and my gratitude and my rewards would actually be worthy of you. He's almost saying, like, I wish you didn't achieve so much, so that my rewards could actually be worthy of you. Only I have left to say, more is thy due than more than all can pay. He's saying, I could reward you with everything I have and you would still deserve more. So here we're seeing the sort of depth of Duncan's love and gratitude and appreciation for Macbeth. And so because Shakespeare is showing us this, he's showing this love and this gratitude that Duncan has. Again, he's creating dramatic irony. If you remember from previous videos, dramatic irony is when the reader knows something that the characters don't. In this case, Duncan is sort of showering Macbeth with praise, but we know that Macbeth is sort of coveting his crown, and we know that Macbeth has these sort of secret desires and thoughts, and so this gives us a completely new perspective, because we're sort of seeing, and we know that Duncan has literally just been talking about trusting someone that betrayed him, and we're sort of starting to think, oh no, he's sort of headed the same way again. And of course, this both creates tension because we know that things are going to go bad, but also engagement. The audience now wants to see, oh, how is all of this going to work out? We can predict what's going to happen. We just now want to find out how it's going to happen. Macbeth says, the service and the loyalty I owe in doing it pays itself. I don't need a reward because the work that I do for you, the service and the loyalty that I give you is its own reward. He says, I don't need a reward. It's rewarding enough to be serving you, to be loyal to you. Whether he means that or not is completely up to your interpretation. Now, you could argue that Macbeth does have love and loyalty towards Duncan at the beginning and that this changes later. Or you could argue that maybe Macbeth is, just presenting this image of the loyal sort of a soldier who happily and gratefully serves his king. There's not really a way of knowing whether he means what he's saying or not. And of course, we've already been introduced to the idea that appearances can be deceptive. So whether or not Macbeth means what he's saying here, that's something that if you are analysing this scene for an exam, for example, you would definitely want to explore, and you'd want to try to give different interpretations and say, well, maybe he means it because, maybe he's being insincere because. And the more different sort of interpretations you pick out, the higher the mark. Your Highness's part is to receive our duties, and our duties are to your throne and state children and servants, which do but what they should, by doing everything safe towards your love and honour. He's saying you do your duty by being the king and ruling, and equally all of us who serve you do our duty by serving you and keeping you safe and keeping the country safe. So he's sort of saying, what I do is already its own reward. You do your duty, I do mine. And Duncan says, welcome hither, welcome here. So hither, so archaic terms. I'll say both just because thither will also come in. Hither here and thither there. We'll see both again many times throughout the text. Welcome here. I have begun to plant thee and will labour to make thee full of growing. So this is a metaphor. Duncan has planted Macbeth almost like a tree and will do everything he can to make him grow. Meaning he is investing in Macbeth's future and success. Yeah, there's a sense that he wants Macbeth to grow, not grow physically, but grow in terms of success, wealth, power. So we know here that Duncan is invested in Macbeth's future. He wants the best for Macbeth. Noble Banquo, that has no less deserved, and he turns to Banquo and he says, you've not deserved any less than Macbeth, nor must be known no less to have done so. Let me enfold thee and hold thee to my heart. And he turns to Banquo and he says, and you're equally as deserving as Macbeth is. Let me enfold you in my. Let me enfold you and hold you to my heart. And he sort of embraces Banquo. So again, we see a lot of like genuine emotion and affection from the king. Banquo says, "There, if I grow, the harvest is your own." Banquo is sort of saying, if I grow, like if, for example, we use this metaphor of the growing tree. If I grow and give tree, the harvest. If I grow like a tree and give fruit, like a harvest, the harvest is your own. You'll be collecting the reward of me growing. So Banquo is sort of saying, if we grow, you kind of benefit from it. You'll sort of reap the rewards. Duncan says, my plenteous joys. Plenteous sort of means many. From the word plenty. My many joys, wanton in fullness, seek to hide themselves in drops of sorrow. He's saying, I have so much happiness that my happiness is hiding itself in drops of sorrow. He's crying from happiness. Sons, kinsmen, thanes. So sons, cousins or relatives, lords. And you whose place are the nearest. No, we will establish our estate upon our eldest Malcolm, whom we name hereafter the Prince of Cumberland, which honour must, not accompanied, invest him only, but signs of nobleness like stars shall shine on all deservers, from hence to Inverness, and bind us further to you. So Duncan is sort of saying he's so happy, he's almost crying from joy. And now that he's surrounded by the people that are the closest to him, yeah, you whose place are the nearest, the people that he loves and trusts the most. So now that Duncan is surrounded by the people he loves and trusts the most, he wants to make an important announcement. And what he wants to announce is that Malcolm, his oldest son, is going to inherit his estate. He's basically going to inherit everything from him, and he's been named the Prince of Cumberland. He's basically become what we call the heir apparent. And that basically means that when Duncan dies, Malcolm is going to inherit the throne. And there's no one else in line. It's just going to be Malcolm. So Malcolm announces Malcolm as his official heir, who will inherit the crown and the throne and rule and become King of Scotland after Duncan's death. So this probably would have been the case, but now he's made it official. He's announced it to all the people closest to him, and he sort of says, he thinks, as far as he's concerned, Malcolm has all the qualities. Yeah, he has all the signs of nobleness, like stars shining upon him. Then he says, from hence to Inverness. Inverness is where Macbeth lives. So from hence to Inverness, Macbeth's castle. Now we're going to Inverness and bind us further to you. So as a way of sort of honouring Macbeth and growing closer to Macbeth, he's going to go and stay at Macbeth's castle as a way to sort of honour him. It would be a really good sign of your sort of status and power and importance if the king stays in your home. Macbeth says, the rest is labour, which is not used for you. I'll be myself the harbinger, and make joyful the hearing of my wife with your approach. So humbly take my leave. A harbinger is like a messenger. A harbinger specifically announces the arrival of someone or something. So he's saying the rest is just work, which you shouldn't have to deal with. I myself am going to bring the message of your arrival to my wife, who's going to be really happy to hear about it. So humbly, I will take my leave. So when someone takes their leave, it means they're kind of like excusing themselves and leaving. So he's saying, I'm going to go tell my wife that you're coming to the castle. So I'm going to be off now. And Duncan sort of sees him off, my worthy Cawdor again. And he's referring to him as Cawdor because now, of course, Macbeth is the Thane of Cawdor. Now, Macbeth speaks aside. And if you remember, aside tells us that he's speaking to himself. Aside is really his thoughts, which, of course, he thinks out loud so that the audience is sort of privy to what he's thinking. And he says this. And this is really important because, again, this gives us really good insight into what's actually going on in Macbeth's head. The Prince of Cumberland. So he's picking up on the fact that Malcolm is now going to inherit the throne. That is a step on which I must fall down or else overleap, for in my way it lies. He's basically saying Malcolm becoming the heir to the throne is almost like an obstacle in his way. And he must either collapse against or fall over this obstacle, or he's going to have to overleap it. He's going to have to jump over this obstacle because it's in his way. And his way, of course, to become king. Now, of course, in the last scene that he spoke about being king, he sort of said something like, if fate will have me king, fate may crown me. And now he's realizing fate is not going to crown him. The crown is not just going to come to him. The crown's going to Malcolm. So now he's realizing Malcolm is another obstacle. And it's an obstacle that Macbeth is going to have to deal with, or sort of collapse against, fall against. So he sort of needs to make a decision now. Is he going to do something about it, or is he going to just let himself be defeated by this new obstacle? Then he says, stars, hide your fires. He's telling the stars to hide their light. And this idea of wanting darkness and wanting light to sort of be extinguished or hidden is definitely a motif in Macbeth. It's a sort of running theme. Stars, hide your fires. Let not light see my black and deep desires. He's commanding, so this is our method here, command and order again. He's commanding the stars to put out their light because he doesn't want them to see his black and deep desires. And black, of course, means dark, bad, evil desires, and deep means very well hidden. His desires are evil and secret. So, of course, that's the desire to become king. And the reason why he's talking to the stars could be because it's the evening and he just wants the night to be dark. But also you could make a sort of AO3, assessment objective 3, link to context here and talk about the belief at the time Shakespeare was writing that the people's fate was written in the stars. This sort of a belief in astrology, which is also mentioned in Romeo and Juliet. This idea that our destiny is sort of already written and lies in the stars, and maybe he's asking for whatever his fate really is to sort of be hidden. He wants to sort of make his own fate. That's definitely an interpretation you could explore here. But what he's actually saying is he doesn't want anyone or anything to know what he secretly deeply wants. Maybe even to a certain extent, he wants to blind himself to his own desires. There's a sense that he kind of he knows that what he feels is very shameful and he definitely shouldn't be feeling it. So there's a sense of almost like denial. He says, the eye wink at the hand, yet let that be which the eye fears when it is done to see. He wants there to be darkness because he doesn't want the eye to see what the hand will do, because the eye would be afraid of what the hand will do. Of course, what he's talking about here is killing Duncan, and he almost doesn't want to see the murder of Duncan. He wants to be able to do it without having to sort of come to terms with it or process it or acknowledge it. And this idea of not being able to look at something really evil that you've done is again an idea that's going to keep coming back up. Right after Macbeth does end up murdering Duncan, when his wife tells him to go back to the scene of the crime, he says to her something like, I don't want to look at what I've done. To see it would be not to know myself. So this idea of Macbeth doing things, but then not wanting to deal with the things that he does, not wanting to see the crime that he commits, is a really, really interesting recurring theme. It tells us, it's definitely worth exploring this idea that Macbeth is willing to do bad things, but doesn't want to sort of see what he's done. And that's definitely something, if you were going to analyze the character of Macbeth, something that I would encourage you to just think about. We don't know for sure what's in Macbeth's heart. We can only sort of take guesses and try to sort of come up with ideas and try to almost sort of psychoanalyze him, try to analyze his personality and his psychology. We can only really come up with theories, but it's really interesting. And you want to sort of almost treat Macbeth like he's a real person and try to think, this was a real person, how would they feel? Why do they feel this way? That's definitely going to be part of high-level analysis. So the eye wink at the hand, yet let that be which the eye fears when it is done to see. He doesn't want to look at what he would have to do if he were to get the throne. And he leaves, he exits. Duncan here speaks, and it's almost like we're halfway through a conversation. It's almost like Duncan and Banquo have been speaking while we've been hearing Macbeth's thoughts, and he's responding to something Banquo has said. He says, "True, worthy Banquo, he is so full valiant." So there's a sense here that Banquo and Duncan have been talking about how brave Macbeth is. So he says, "True, worthy Banquo, he being Macbeth, so full, he is full so valiant, he's so full of courage and bravery. And in his commendations I am fed, it is a banquet to me." He's hearing so many good things about Macbeth. It's like a banquet. It's like a feast of compliments and praise that he's hearing about Macbeth. Let's after him. So let's go after Macbeth, whose care is gone before to bid us welcome, who's gone on ahead to make sure that he can welcome us to his castle in the best way possible. It is a peerless kinsman. Peerless means you're without peer, without equal. Yeah, Macbeth is a peerless kinsman. He's without equal. He's the best relative you could have. Yeah, we know that everything that Duncan feels about Macbeth does not reciprocate. Macbeth does not feel this way. And so this scene, we've come to the end of scene 4, full of characterization. So in terms of the method, remember when I spoke structurally speaking, we've had our exposition, our key sort of information at the beginning. We had the inciting incident of the witch's prophecy. And here this scene, there's not really a lot of plot happening apart from the fact that Duncan has announced his son as his heir, but we have a lot of characterization, a lot of Shakespeare just giving us a sense of who these characters are and the relationships between them. Quite a few key quotes here, and this scene, this tiny scene here with Macbeth kind of talking to himself is very, very important, because very commonly many students and many people believe that Macbeth never thinks about murdering King Duncan before Lady Macbeth suggests it. And many people argue that Macbeth doesn't want the crown until Lady Macbeth sort of bullies him into wanting to trying to get it. But actually, there's quite a few clues in the opening scenes that Macbeth does secretly want the crown. He does have these deep and black desires, as he mentions here. So definitely something you don't want to ignore, and it will set you apart from many other students when you are writing about Macbeth. As usual, I hope that this was helpful. You are more than welcome, if you have any questions, to post in the comments. Your questions could be about the scene, a word, a quote that maybe I didn't cover in as much detail. It could be a question about just the plot of Macbeth. It could be about the assessment objectives, the themes, characters, context. It could be about essay writing or the exam specifically. There is no such thing as a silly question. I hope this was helpful, and I hope to see you all in the next one.